You're listening to the Travis Makes Money podcast presented by GoHighLevel.com. For a free 30-day trial of the best all-in-one digital marketing software tool on the planet, just go to GoHighLevel.com/Travis. What's going on, moneymakers? Welcome back to another episode of the Travis Makes Money podcast, where it's our mission to help you make more money. Today on the show, it's a doozy of an episode. I have my friend Dave Asprey coming on the show today. So basically what happened was this is another snippet from a full conversation that we had over on the Travis Makes Friends podcast. So if you want to listen to this full conversation, you got to go check it out on Travis Makes Friends because Dave has a wild story. He is largely known as the father of biohacking. He coined the term biohacking many, many years ago before everybody was talking about it, before they had entire conferences dedicated to this thing. And in the full episode, we talk, health, longevity, friendship, loneliness, and all these other things, meditation and things like that. However, in this episode, what we want to do is take some of the snippets from this episode and put them into Travis Makes Money that are all about business and entrepreneurship. And Dave, who is largely well known for Bulletproof Coffee, he was the first guy to be putting MCT oil and butter in his coffee, which kind of took off around the world. He has now built and scaled multiple different brands, typically in the health and longevity space, and has generated hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue in those brands. So he is not just somebody who knows about health and longevity and wellness. He is actually an entrepreneur first, which we talk about in this episode. So there is a lot to be learned from Dave, from startup all the way through to very, very mature companies employing lots of people. So hopefully you will get something from this episode. And if you want to check out the full one, be sure to search Travis Makes Friends, whatever podcast app you're listening to, and check out the full episode with Dave Asprey. Now enjoy this snippet of my conversation with Dave.
You think that you're in charge, but your body's in charge. And it runs the operating system of all life on the planet. And this is the same life if it runs a herd of deer, slime mold, or politicians, kind of the same thing. Anything that's alive, trees, plants, they all run this. And they run it before any conscious thought can happen. And we measure brainwaves. You can prove this over and over. So number one is fear. These are all F words. So if something is scary to your body, not to your mind, your body will say, okay, let's make him feel fear about it. And that means instantly run away from, kill, or hide. This will take 9 times more energy than anything else in your body. And if you learn how to meditate, it'll only take 6 times more energy. This is a overriding operating system level, do not get eaten or fall off a cliff kind of a thing. But it takes a lot of energy to do that. So if your body says, all right, it's not scary, what's next? Another F word, food. Famine has killed everything, at least a few times in the last couple billion years. So a third of the average person's thoughts every day are about tacos. Right? It's about food anyway. Right? There are studies of this. So what would happen if you weren't feeling hungry? Would you have more willpower available? Yeah, and there's evidence of this for sure. So we have fear and then food. This is before you can think. And then the next F word that all life has to do to stay around forever, you know that one? You have to know.
Friendship.
No. Multiple generations, dude. Fear, food. It's an F word. You got this.
I'm failing the quiz right now.
It's not failing. No, I'm going to say fertility, but it's the other F word.
I see.
So literally,
I see what you're saying.
All of reality, every microsecond, all the time, your hardware, the meat you ride around in, it is saying, is it scary? Can I eat it? And should I hump it?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything you've ever done you're ashamed of that isn't one of those 3?
That's a good question. Probably not.
No. All of the things that we take credit for that our body does automatically, it's a huge source of shame and guilt. And it's natural. Of course, going to the gym looks less attractive than eating the pizza.
Yeah.
That's just your operating system trying to keep you from starving to death. And it's okay that you don't want to do that. It's not even you. It's your body wanting to do that. So it seems kind of dark. Because if you're sitting in a meeting for your business and your operating system's going, is that person scary? Is this scary? Oh, can I eat that? Oh, look, there's something. And then, oh my gosh, like, look at those legs. How are you going to get anything done? Yeah. And that's where your prefrontal cortex comes in. And what I'm proposing is that you can reprogram those 3 things. And when you do that, you spend a lot less energy on them, and that fear becomes peace, and that hunger becomes nourishment, and that OnlyFans and and all of the other things that people do,
Pornhub,
that becomes actually a source of altered states, like sacred nourishment. In fact, 20% of people report meeting God during orgasm at least once in their life. So there's a chapter in Heavily Meditated saying one of the gateways to altered states is conscious practices in the bedroom.
Yeah.
And it's no better or worse than psychedelics. It's just something to know about. And if that's the one that resonates, then go take a class on how to do it. Like, it's not that hard to do. And then, thankfully, there's 2 more F words that your body will process in order all the time before you can think. And you can't stop it from running these, but you can change what it identifies as a threat or as a food or as an appropriate mate. And the next F word is friend. You nailed it. We are wired in our bones to support our species and others around us. All life on Earth will do this. And this is why sheep form a herd. This is why vegans also form a herd. It's just kidding, vegans. I love you guys. I was a vegan. I have to say that. Anyway, it's also why we see a glade of trees and we see ecosystems. Life supports life. And the way we do that is with our tribe and with our friends. And when you have connection, authentic connection with your friends, or even just with your community, it is a source of nourishment for your operating system, for your body. And the final F word, that's really the basis of Heavily Meditated, is forgiveness. Because if you have enough energy left, because you weren't afraid, you weren't hungry, you felt loved, and you felt connected, you have so much energy left. What forgiveness is the process of turning off system alerts in your body. So if you're feeling angry about something, you can run the reset process from the book. There's 8 steps. It works better with electrodes on your head at my brain science laboratory, but I'm giving away a $20,000 piece of information in the book because I just want people to be able to do it at home. And when you do this, you're like, man, every time that happens, it just pisses me off and I lose sleep over it and it just gets under my skin. Your body's going to keep doing that. It's just trying to keep you safe. And it's going to do that for the rest of your life unless you do something about it. And it isn't about willing yourself to not do that. It is happening before the thoughts.
Yeah.
So there's a way of going into an altered state. And there's a whole chapter in the book on this. And it's what I teach, billionaires on how to do this. And when they're done, they're different people because they're driving and someone cuts them off. Their heart rate doesn't change. They just don't care, right? Their mother-in-law says something mean to them and they just laugh instead of getting triggered.
Yeah.
Right. And 91.7% of people who run the reset process for 5 days with my team report improved relationships.
Wow.
And almost every other measure of positive improvement is 50% or more people are reporting them. It's crazy. It's achievable.
Yeah.
And when entrepreneurs come, they're coming to 40 years of Zen, and we have an executive chef and we have custom-made hardware and software. Like, it's a whole program. But the core piece of technology there is actually a process. It doesn't have to be the electronics. And that is why I wrote Heavily Meditated. Because if we can build a world full of people who are impossible to trigger, it means it's impossible to be programmed. You get to choose your state. You get to choose your programming. And when a marketing company comes along and tries to manipulate you, you'll laugh. When a government comes along and tries to manipulate you, you'll laugh. When anyone tries to say what you must do, you'll laugh and say, I don't choose to do that.
Yeah.
So it's actually the highest level of freedom is to be resilient, to be able to choose your state and to not be cowed, to not be scared, to not be programmed, and to recognize that if your body does feel fear, that's natural and it's normal, and to have zero guilt and zero shame and exactly the tools to turn it off quickly. Unless it's real fear, because there is a tiger in the room, in which case your body's going to make the right stress hormones, you'll jump out of the way. Hooray.
Sure.
So there are things that are actually worthy of fear. It's just your body's terrible at finding them.
Using it when it's useful.
Yeah.
Rather than when it's not. Yeah. Because then you start making all the decisions from this state of fight or flight and anxiousness.
Yeah.
That's not a great state to be making, life-changing decisions from.
Not at all. I worked at the start of the biohacking movement with a guy who was a hedge fund trader.
Okay.
Was buying his own island, kind of a thing. And I said, well, let's use a little device here and let's track your stress. It's called heart rate variability, but it's real-time heart rate variability. It's something you can train. And I write about this in Heavily Meditated too. And he goes, all right, fine. And hedge fund managers generally don't do anything they don't want to do. So he doesn't do it. He gets bored on an airplane. He does it. He goes, oh, that was pretty good. And I'm going to do it every day for 6 weeks, like you said. And he says, all right, at the end of 6 weeks, I can put myself in this unstressed parasympathetic state. And he puts a little clip on his ear, sits down, market bell rings to open, and he goes into the red zone. And he goes, you know what? For 20 years, I've been trading from a state of fight or flight, and I didn't know it.
Wow.
Because until you've been trained on these techniques, you will not know the feeling of your body being sympathetic. It's unless you're highly anxious and stressed, you're way in that zone. But when it flips over, you won't feel it. So it took him another 6 weeks of training. And when he was done, he was like, I am now unstressed when I trade. My trades are better, and I come up at the end of the day and I have energy for my kids. And that is so precious. If you're allocating energy consciously or unconsciously to anger, fear, loneliness, cravings, it just wastes all the energy that you ought to be putting into your mission and into your family, into your community. So I just want people to shift out of fear and out of loneliness and out of junk food land and into how do I do more for the world around me? Because the world around you will take care of you if you take care of it. And I think that's missing.
I love that you brought up the friendship community thing. Obviously, the show's called Travis Makes Friends. We talk a lot about the loneliness thing. It was kind of almost by accident, honestly. We before the show was called Build Your Network for a few years. Talked about like networking for professionals. And frankly, I just kind of got bored of the topic and just started annoying me to keep talking about it. And so I was like, well, what about, what can we still talk about that's somewhat related? And I, through my research, kind of found that like the best quote unquote networkers I knew were really just good at building friendships with people. But for some reason, we put them in two separate categories. So I was like, well, why don't we just talk about making friends? And I started doing more research on it and started figuring out like, wow, 50% of US adults report feelings of loneliness. Loneliness is worse for your physical well-being than smoking up to 15 cigarettes per day. It's a double-digit increase in all-cause mortality just from internal subjective feelings of loneliness. And I started looking at, all the blue zones, which for anybody listening would be the places in the world where the highest concentration of centenarians exist, people who live past 100. And the diets were kind of all over the place. The main thing was that they were whole food diets.
There's one other main thing too you might not know about.
Yeah, please.
Not to burst the bubble there. These are also areas that have very high taxes and very low income and bad record keeping.
Really?
So there's a meaningful number of these super centenarians who just took over their parents' identity to avoid inheritance tax.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty wild. So it's skewed data.
Yeah, and Dan Buettner is a lovely human who's responsible for blue zones. And unfortunately, I don't think the nutritional conclusions are accurate, but I think his motivations are so good. Like he's a great guy, and I've appreciated getting to know him. Yeah.
Well, one of those things that was inherent in all of those places was a deep sense of belonging.
Yes.
A deep sense of community. And I wouldn't call myself a biohacker per se, but I've done a lot more research than the typical person just by having the show. We've done over 1,000 episodes on the podcast. I've talked to a lot of different people from a lot of different walks of life. I've read a lot of different books, including yours, including Peter Attia's work, including Stephen Gundry's, like all these different people who I've researched. And the one thing I find missing from the majority of it is community, is belonging. And it seems like that's one of the more inherent, bigger needle movers that exists. Why, first of all, do you think that the community isn't really focusing as much on that as a lever to pull? And what can we do about it?
I think with guys like Peter Attia, he's very focused on things like cholesterol, which most of the longevity doctors that I know of are not believing in anymore. So it's very mechanistic, right? Community is how I made biohacking into a $63 billion industry. I've been running the Biohacking conference for, this will be our 13th year. We have 4,000 people showing up for 3 days in Austin, May 28th. Steve Aoki is playing sets for us. And I've got like the top speakers in the world. Joe Dispenza's there, James Nestor, the author of the book Breath. Ryan Holiday about stoicism. So it's this interesting mix of mindset, but it's there for the community. And I started the first grass-fed, no bad seed oil restaurant in LA about 10, 12 years ago.
Okay.
And it was for community. You don't make money in restaurants in LA, right? And people met, they got married, their businesses were started there. It became a community meeting spot to make biohacking a thing. And today, I'm running Upgrade Labs, which is a franchise for biohacking and AI and longevity. So people come in and there's a big area in the front where you sit down in community around a piece of tech that actually changes the mitochondrial charge in your cells. So you're sitting there talking with people, building community. I don't think you can do the advanced personal development practices by yourself. It does not work. I would not be here if my elders hadn't taken me under their wings when I was in my 20s. If I hadn't have done some of this advanced healing work with sages and gurus and therapists and all the other stuff, it's not a lonely path. So you have to have that.
It's more inherent in the pursuit.
Yeah. And I interviewed the former Surgeon General of the US who'd only ever written one book.
Vivek Murthy.
And when he came on, he's like, look, this is right before I think Biden brought him back in as Surgeon General. And he said, there's an epidemic, not a pandemic, just an epidemic of loneliness. And wow, after serving many presidents, it's like, this is my number one observation. And if you look, the number of clubs have just gone down and down and down. When's the last time you were a member of a bowling league?
Yeah.
Or any of the things that used to just be normal things? It's been replaced by swiping. And that's not necessarily a good thing. But here's the problem that I've seen and I've experienced. If you're an entrepreneur, it's very hard to have normal friends.
Yeah.
And you can have normal friends, but you're talking about amounts of money that are not in the same universe as most of your friends.
Yeah.
And you're talking about problems that only go two ways if you share them with someone who's not a very unusual person. It's either going to drive envy, which is one of the nastiest things to deal with in friendships, or it's going to drive greed. Right. So saying, I have this problem, I have this, $5 million thing, and I don't know what to do with it. Or whatever else the problem is. And you're talking to someone who is a good person, but the Venn diagram overlap is so small. So you say, okay, well, then I'll just talk to people in my company. Yeah, those are your friends, except you can fire them and take away all of their money, right? So, I have a couple of people who've been with me for 10, 12 years, and I care deeply about them, and they're my friends. And at the end of the day, if they don't do what I say, they get fired. Right. And so there's always a little wedge in there. So I also, if I was really losing my mind about the business, I'm unlikely to call them up and be like, oh my God, so that just, you can't do that in leadership. So what's left, what entrepreneurs have to do is find other entrepreneurs who understand their problems. And one of the ways I've worked on solving that, I run an event called Business of Biohacking, and I teach biohacking CEOs how to build a company like I did that did $750 million in lifetime revenues when I was running it. That was Bulletproof. So I'm like, let me bring in my friends who are teachers and trainers and top marketing people, and let me show you, here's how fundraising works. So this year in October, we should have about 200 entrepreneurs, and that's where you form a tribe.
Yeah.
I have spent probably $100,000 a year on being a member of mastermind groups for the last 10 years. And that's an insane amount of money. It's actually not insane if you're running a business, though, because it's deductible. And the reason I do that is it puts me in a room where I can talk about things I don't know how to solve with people who've solved it before. And the money just serves as a filter, right? And if I was to go to a $1,000 instead of $25,000 thing like Genius Network with Joe Polish, which I've been a member for many years, it's $25,000. If I was to go to one of those, I'm likely to be supporting entrepreneurs who are running small businesses, but they're not going to be able to support me because I've got a couple more zeros in the problems I have, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. And I love supporting entrepreneurs. That's why I run an event for that. But that means if I'm going to have the advice that I need and the ability to kind of open the kimono and talk about the problems of being in business, it's got to be with people who understand the nature of the problem. And I think entrepreneurs are profoundly lonely most of the time because of this weird dynamic. And if you have a job, like, okay, talk to other people with a job. Like it's a kind of a normal thing. And I've had jobs a lot of my life. And when I became an entrepreneur, I remember I got my first venture capital round and it was $8 million. And I'm driving on Highway 101 near Sand Hill Road, just got out of the meeting. And I looked at the amount of the company I sold and I'm like, my net worth is now $40 million. Like, so like, who do I call? I call my parents? They can't process that number of zeros.
Right.
It's not in their universe. In fact, I think there's some financial trauma in there somewhere. So that's not going to be good. So I'm like, can I call my wife at the time? No, I know there's financial trauma there. Yeah. It's just going to like make her eyes get big. And it's not. And you know what? I didn't call anybody. Mm-hmm. I didn't have the right people to call. And I just sat with it. It's like, wow, I kind of want to celebrate.
Yeah.
Right. This is really common. So this is why you got to find your tribe. And this is why having friends is good. And there's another part of Heavily Meditated that could be really valuable for our listeners. No one teaches you how to pick friends, right? True. Like your parents probably never got taught. So they might have tried to teach you or a coach. So you stumble into it, or even worse, you're 16 and you ask another 16-year-old how to pick friends.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. You should ask someone who's 60 years old when you're 16. They might know, but they still probably don't know. And so people make a lot of mistakes and it costs a lot emotionally and even spiritually. What I learned that's maybe the most important thing for friendships and for entrepreneurships and community building and maintaining a culture is that there's only 4 kinds of people. And this comes from Lao Tzu, which is basically the Buddha of China. Okay. There's one monastery where his direct lineage has been passed down. And my friend Dr. Barry, who's in the book, taught me this.
Okay.
Category 1 people, they're always win-win. So if they do something with you, you benefit, they benefit. You might not benefit the same amount, doesn't really matter, but both people walk away better off. And they're consistent. 5% of people, very rare. And then there's category 2 people. They're usually win-win. They want to be win-win, but they screw up. And when they screw up, you can say, hey, man, that wasn't cool. And they go, I didn't know. I'm sorry. How do I make it right? You only want to have friends who are category 1 and category 2. Category 3, they're win-lose, but they don't know it.
Oof.
So this is the kind of person who will always blame other people for their problems. And you could have a video of them in a room stabbing people, holding a knife, covered in blood with a locked door. And then you unlock the door and go in and say what happened. They go, oh, it wasn't me. It couldn't have been me because I'm a good person. And they believe it. On a lie detector, it'll be true.
Yeah.
And so they're always win-lose, but you can't really tell because they believe that they're a good person. And you go to help that friend, it's weird.
Yeah.
They always benefit and you don't. And whatever they said was going to happen that was good for you never did happen. And then there's category 4 people. These are win-lose and they know it. They're sociopaths and psychopaths. And if you have a friend who's category 3 or category 4, the biggest sign, or an employee, if you just immediately like this person way more than you should, that's a huge red flag. And this comes from Robert Cialdini at the University of Arizona. I've had him on the show a couple of times. And it's like, this is a sign that they're running an operation on you. Maybe they're a sociopath and they know it. Maybe they're a narcissist, the category 3, and they don't know it. But it's not normal to just immediately fall in love with someone. And so watch out for that. It doesn't mean it's not real. It's like, oh, this is the coolest person ever. We got to connect. They're so helpful. Just be patient and see if it's real.
Yeah.
And my goal in the 9 companies in my portfolio now, if we accidentally hire a category 3, we fire him within 60 days. And if I'd have followed that advice, I would have at least $100 million in my pocket right now.
Wow.
Because I hired someone like this, and I write about this in Heavily Meditated. This executive looked me and the board in the eye every single day. I just raised $30 million of venture capital money. and we're going to grow at 40%, and we're going to lose it's either $4 or $5 million, I don't remember, some small amount of money, but we're going to grow dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
And it was going to set us up for an IPO. Well, every week, every month, oh yeah, we're on track. And then December 1st, she goes, we might lose 5 million instead of 4 million. I'm like, okay, that's kind of a miss, but we have enough cash. And then December 31st, she goes, oopsie, I lost 28 million.
Oh my gosh.
So I said, did you really just burn 3 years of venture capital while looking me and everyone else in the eye and telling us it wasn't happening? And here's what I learned. This person did not know what was happening because their story was, I don't fail. Therefore, if I'm failing, it can't be real and I can't see it. And I had all the red flags of this narcissistic pattern, the category 3 pattern, but I didn't know those red flags. Once I learned this, it was like unlocking stuff that didn't make sense. I'm like, I get it. And so when you're working on building your community, your closest friends, and building your company, you better learn how to identify the category 3s and 4s and what to do about it. And that's also in heavily meditated.